In today's video, we're taking a look at some potential trades we may see between the Calgary Flames as well as the Winnipeg Jets. We also have some significant news regarding the World Junior scandal from 2018. A big update from Deputy Commissioner Bill Daly. Plus, it's a historic day in women's hockey as a new league kicked off everything with announcing their original 6 teams. We'll discuss all that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot to cover today. Let's kick things off with the historic announcement of the new Professional Women's Hockey League, which will be kicking off their first season coming up here shortly with their original 6 teams. Of course, we've seen some variations of pro women's hockey leagues between Canada and the US before, but nothing has really been able to have a real stable setting to have a long effect and survive and be something that can be built upon. Hopefully this is the one that will do that. Of course, this is a lot more structurally sound with financial backers. The Professional Women's Hockey League made their big announcement today that their original 6 teams are going to be Montreal, Toronto, Ottawa in Canada, and then New York, Boston, and Minnesota in the US. So they're all kind of eastern and central for starting off. There is plans and discussions in the works to hopefully be able to expand in the not too distant future. I would imagine, at least a year or two down the road, we're probably looking at adding some more teams. There's certainly a footprint for women's hockey and plenty of other locations as well. But those are the 3 teams that are going to be getting started. So, of course, how things are going to work is we are going to have a draft. There's going to be free agency. We'll discuss all that here shortly. For right now, there's no league logo. They're the Professional Women's Hockey League. It is unionized for the players. The union is headed up by Brian Burke, of course, longtime NHL executive. I'm sure everybody knows who Brian Burke is. Has a long history in the game of hockey. He'll be a great voice to lead the women's union. So no league logo yet. There's no team names here as of yet. The only rule in place is that any other previous women's leagues that recently folded, they can't use those team names that were recently used. Otherwise, it's fair game. So that has to be determined. They're in the process of hiring general managers for all these 6 teams as well, which will likely be announced, I would think, very, very quickly because free agency opens September 1st, which is only a few days away. They have around a pool of about 300 players. They have to declare that they want to participate in the draft. And essentially how it works is each team is going to have an opportunity to sign 3 players during the 10-day free agent period. So those contracts are going to probably be your top players in the women's game. They will have the best opportunity to get the more lucrative deals. So each team will sign 3 players. Everybody else will go into a draft. The draft's going to be held September the 18th in Toronto. It's going to be 15 rounds. That'll give them 18 players. Then all the other players that are not selected essentially become free agents, and then they can have an opportunity to negotiate contracts or go to training camp of those 6 teams as a tryout. The league wants each team to have, I think the number was around 28 skaters in training camp. So they want a lot of these players to have opportunities to at least go to camps on tryouts. Obviously, the top players, I believe, are going to be making around $80,000 a year. So it's not huge money. It's nothing like the men make right now. But it's a start, and it's at least a lot of these players are going to have an opportunity to at least make enough money that they can, play full time and not have to worry about holding down other jobs and all that kind of stuff. Because right now, a lot of these women, they work full time other jobs or part time other jobs and trying to play hockey, and it's tough. They rely heavily on sponsors. It's just not financially rewarding, and hopefully this will change that. So certainly it's like I said, a historic day. Great news for all of these cities to be a part of the original 6 in the women's game. They are partnering with the NHL. The NHL at this point, I don't believe has any financial backing, but they are partnering when it comes to just getting a lot of advice on how to get things going. They are going to be, I think, involved with the NHL a little bit just to get some exposure I think they mentioned like there's going to hopefully be some opportunities to around like the Winter Classic, All-Star games, like certain things like that. There'll be different events that they kind of work together, which will hopefully gain more exposure for their game. They're still in the process of securing what arena building that each team is going to play in and all that. So there's still a lot of details to be ironed out, but essentially we have the league is officially kicked off. We have 6 teams. And it's a major step forward to developing the female version of what the NHL is. So to me, like I said, it's historic. It's awesome news. I know plenty of young girls, that play the sport, and now they have something to strive for more on a professional level. So this is going to hopefully encourage and motivate a lot of young girls that currently play hockey. I know plenty that love the sport, including my own child, and it gives them something to strive for. It's a huge deal. It really gives girls something to look forward to and look up to, and to think that they can hopefully have an opportunity to play the game and make a living at it someday. So it's we'll see how everything works out. Hopefully everything launches successfully, and we'll be covering more details here as things get rolled out. So hopefully they can get some TV exposure too, because there wasn't mention of anything like that today. I don't know how you're going to be able to watch the games besides going to watch in person. So hopefully they can get some, at least a streaming service or get on TV or something. That's going to be pivotal as well to having this be successful. So we'll see, but huge news in the Professional Women's Hockey League today. A bunch of PTOs announced, mainly with Carolina. Carolina has announced they got 3 players coming on tryouts to their training camp coming up, including defenseman Nick Shore and forwards Corey Conacher and Brendan Perlini. Now, Corey Conacher and Brendan Perlini are both also under contract for the American Hockey League Chicago Wolves. As we've talked about before, the Chicago Wolves are now an independent American Hockey League franchise, meaning they do not have an NHL affiliate. So if you play on that team, you don't have the option of getting called up. I mean, they do have rules that to follow for how many veterans they can have, how many young players and all that. But you're kind of have an opportunity to maybe make a little bit more money in some senses, especially if you're a veteran like these guys. But you're not going to get any chance to go to the NHL. So if they can get a contract with Carolina, then obviously that would be better. As I mentioned, they're not the only players from that team attending NHL camps on tryouts. The only thing I don't know is where they're under contract for the American Hockey League already. Can these teams offer them 2-way deals? I don't know the answer to that. I'm going to say probably not. Because they're already linked to an American Hockey League team. I think unless they can get a 1-way deal, they're probably going back to Chicago. I don't really know how that's going to work, but that's something to need clarity on, because this is a whole new concept with having an American Hockey League team that's completely independent like that. Deputy Commissioner Bill Daly completed an interview with The Athletic and talked about a variety of topics, but one thing that caught my eye was an update on the 2018 World Junior Championship team that's been under investigation. That scandal's been in the news, and we've been waiting for results for a long time. It's been over a year since the news first broke of what allegedly took place, and it's been a really long time since investigations were launched by the NHL, and then the police in the London, Ontario area where this allegedly took place reopened their own investigation, and we've been waiting forever, it feels like, to find out what the investigation results found. Do they feel players were indeed guilty? Are there going to be repercussions? The last we had heard, I believe it was Andy Strickland, who's a well-respected reporter on his podcast it feels like probably about a month ago now. I'm not sure. I can't remember the exact date, but I want to say it was in July sometime. Said that he was told that there was 5 players that were deemed to have been, I guess you could say, guilty in some capacity of being a part of this, and that we're going to be facing lengthy suspensions. He even was told names. Now, according to Bill Daly, who updated everything with this interview with The Athletic, he says he's expecting to have the full report very shortly, as in sooner than later, like very soon. So if they, according to that answer, doesn't have the report yet, how can there really be leaks on number of players involved? Like, it just seems conflicting. So, I mean, Andy Strickland's a well-respected journalist. I'm not saying what he gave out was information and was wrong, I guess time will tell if he was right or wrong or not. However, it just seems odd based on the answers lining up here. Now, what he did say as well, which I found interesting, he says that he expects to have the full report very shortly, but his follow-up statement was, what flows from that is really unknown at this point. So essentially, he really made it sound like they have no idea what could come from it. So I don't know. I mean, this is conflicting. It's a little bit confusing. At the end of the day, if they have the report shortly, I don't know. Hopefully we get some clarity on this, find out what really happened. I'm sure the victim would like to have some closure, and if there's obviously, have their story backed up and have some justice here. And I'm sure the NHL teams, if they have players that they wonder if they're involved, so they can, determine their own team's impact, would probably like to know as well. Like, there's lots that like to know. And of course, if there's guilty parties, they need to be facing consequences. And clearly it's a lot of that still up in the air, but it sounds like they'll have the report very shortly. Hopefully they act on it and we get word onto what actually went down. One update as well on a significant injury we saw at the end of last year. Anton Forsberg, goalie for the Ottawa Senators. I did see he was answering some questions in a short interview and confirmed that his kind of freak fluke double knee injury that he suffered near the end of last season, that he is 100% good to go and fully healed and recovered. He said actually that the recovery wasn't that bad, and that if the Senators had have made the playoffs, that he likely could have played before the end of the first round. So ultimately, if he could have played then that gives you that much more comfortableness that he will be good to go for sure by the time you get through training camp and have the season open. Hopefully everything is fully recovered and he can obviously be a big part of the team moving forward. He was a pretty solid goalie last year and should hopefully form a pretty good tandem with his old friend Jonas Korpisalo, who they've won an American Hockey League championship together back a number of years ago. I'm sure they'd like to recreate that magic and see if they can do it in Ottawa now. Now, as I mentioned, I do want to take a look at some NHL trade talk. There's a variety of some scenarios here I want to take a look at. This actually comes from an article on The Score. The Score, this is basically these trade scenarios were written as hypothetical, so they're not, rumors from a reporter saying, I heard this is being discussed or anything of that nature. It's more of a scenario that there's a group of, I think it was 4 writers that collaborated on this article, and it was more of a case of, here's a trade scenario. Do you think they would do this deal? Which team would say no to this? Or do you think it's a good deal? Would they proceed, etc.? It's like more like that kind of scenario. So they all kind of put their 2 cents in. So one player that I looked at in here that I found intriguing was, this is a deal that we've heard rumored, except we hadn't really heard much about a rumored return, but it involves Calgary Flames defenseman Noah Hannafin. We've heard him linked to about 3 different teams. One we've heard before was Buffalo, which makes a lot of sense. Another team that's come up a number of times as well is the Dallas Stars, and that's where this article actually has him being traded to with a contract extension in place. So the proposed trade here is Noah Hannafin being traded from Calgary to Dallas with an extension. I believe it was a $7.5 million 7-year deal to Dallas in return for forward Radek Faksa, a very interesting top prospect, and Maverick Bourque, and a first-round pick. Now, to me, that's a pretty solid return. I know I've seen Maverick Bourque play a lot in junior. I really like his upside. I think he could be a terrific player. So the fact you're getting a first-round pick where you might be able to get another player, hopefully of similar magnitude, and Bourque, to me, that's pretty good. Faksa, I'm not crazy about the contract that comes with Faksa. If they do lose Michael Backlund in a separate trade or to free agency, he might be able to play like a third-line center role to what Backlund has done often in his career, although Backlund at times has also had to play like a number 2 center role. But with everything now, depending on what happens with Lindholm, you get Condrey there, like Faksa wouldn't be more than number 3. But you just don't get a lot of offense on a Faksa, and that's the issue with his contract. But I can see why Dallas would need some money to go out, right? Pretty much any team acquiring a player that's making a decent amount of money can't just absorb the contract without a contract going out. There's not too many teams that can do that. So Faksa, Bourque, and a first to Calgary for Hannafin. What do you think of that trade? Personally, I think it's a good deal for Calgary. I think that the Flames would accept an offer of that stature. Dallas, I mean, to get quality, you got to give up quality. I mean, to give up a player like Bourque and a first, I can see Dallas maybe taking issue with that and maybe trying to push for a different package with one of those pieces in there, but not both. And if they are going to include the first rounder, maybe it's a different prospect or a different young player. Maybe it's Ty Dellandrea. Maybe it's a different, first round pick. I don't know. A different prospect that was recently drafted, for example. I don't know. But I mean, Bourque is a good one, so we'll see. But to me, Calgary does that deal all day long, and Dallas to me is probably, but maybe a no. They might think it's an overpay. I don't know. But let me know what you think. Do you think the Dallas Stars do that deal? Do you think the Calgary Flames do that deal? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Now, another trade proposed in this article is also involving the Calgary Flames and centerman Elias Lindholm. And this landing spot for him is the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now, they've been one of the other teams that have been rumored to be linked to Hanifin. So it was mainly been Columbus and Buffalo, really, prior to now. And then Dallas has been popping up lately. So those are like the three teams that have been in the rumor mill linked to Hanifin. But then Lindholm to Columbus does make some sense as well. I mean, the Columbus Blue Jackets, their issues have been depth down the middle. Lindholm is a solid number one center. Plays a solid two-way game. Of course, the Columbus Blue Jackets, certainly can solve a little bit of that center depth as well with their draft pick from the 2023 NHL draft. Certainly getting Adam Fantilli is huge. If you trade for Lindholm, you bring in Fantilli, that center depth all of a sudden looking a whole heck of a lot different right now. Now, this trade involves Lindholm going to the Jackets in exchange for young player Cole Sillinger, who's an interesting player, a first-round pick, and defenseman Adam Boqvist. So, of course, if the Hanifin trade went through, they would have moved him. So, obviously, there'd be, a bit of a hole in the D core. I mean, they do have lots of other defensemen, depending on who else all stays, of course. Boqvist might be an interesting player coming back on the back end. You get Sillinger and a first. I don't know. To me, that's a tough deal. I like the trade for Columbus. I mean, like I said, to get value, you got to give up value. Lindholm's a phenomenal player. So I really like that concept of them going after a guy like him. I don't take issue with the return for Columbus. Calgary, I wonder if the Flames think they can do better. I do wonder that. Of course, their preference is still to sign Lindholm, but it does sound like originally we were thinking, based on everything that was been told by the media, that it sounded like Elias Lindholm's decision was more about the direction of the team. But I don't think that's the case any longer, and I'm not really sure that's entirely 100% true. After listening to the latest 32 Thoughts podcast and the information that's come out of the NHL European Media Tour, where Friedman and Merrick interviewed Flames defenseman Rasmus Andersson, based on Andersson's comments, he made it sound like the Lindholm situation was more about money. So, at that point, I don't know. They've offered Lindholm a pretty hefty extension. I don't know exactly what the number is, of course, on the contract, but it's believed to be an 8-year deal, at least in the $8 to $9 million range. I don't know how much higher they need to go, but certainly, it's getting a little tricky there for sure. But, if the money's too much and they have to move them, then certainly this is a decent return for Calgary, but can they do better? I honestly do wonder. So I think Columbus says yes for sure. Calgary, I'm a little iffy. The other one I want to acknowledge here as well in this article, and there's a few other deals that are talked about in this article, which we'll probably look at on another day, just to break things up. I don't want to be too long here today. But Mark Scheifele going to the Seattle Kraken. Of course, Scheifele's been in the rumor mill for a long time. We know there's a pretty good chance he gets moved. Seattle has not been a team that's been really linked to him, but it does make some sense. I mean, if you look at their roster, certainly they're a pretty solid team. They're a team that works by committee. They don't have a ton of star players, but they do have a lot of good depth, and all cylinders were clicking last year. And look at what they did. In their second year, they make the playoffs, went to the second round. They score a lot by committee. But if you look at their area, to me, to be honest, I think the center position is an area that could stand to be upgraded. It would take the pressure off Manny Beniers longer term on having to be the number one guy. If he could play number 2 center spot and have a guy like Scheifele in front of him, would probably be a huge help for him. Takes the pressure off a little bit, gets him some different matchups. Scheifele, of course, would go to Seattle and sign an extension. And going back to the Winnipeg Jets was going to be a first-round pick, a 4th-round pick, prospect Ryan Winterton, another young player, and Cole Lynn, formerly the Vancouver Canucks, and then Alex Wenberg. Now, this is a difficult one. I think Seattle would probably do this deal. I don't think that they would decline that, but I don't know about Winnipeg. I mean, Wenberg, they probably don't want expiring contract. He's probably not going to stay, and they may not want him long-term anyway. Cole Lynn at this point I'm not sure he's a full-time NHL player. Ryan Winterton is an interesting prospect. I've seen him play a decent amount in junior as well. I do think that there's some potential there, but it's hard to say how much. And then you get 2 picks. I honestly think that the Jets could probably do better. So I do really like the concept of Scheifele to Seattle. But I think they're going to have to up the ante on this one to get the Jets and Cheveldae off to pull the trigger myself. That's my take on this. I love the idea. Honestly do. I think Scheifele and Beniers in being your top 2 centers is great. I know Jared McCann can play center. If you can get him on the wing and it allows you to load up your top 6 even more, it's even better. So to me, I like the idea. I just don't know that the return is there. I think the Kraken need to up the ante here a little bit to get Cheveldae off and the Jets to bite. So let me know your thoughts on those proposed trades. Would you do those deals? Which team says no? Let me know your thoughts on the Women's League being announced today, as well as everything else discussed in today's video. Let me know in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.